Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the worst insert cards of 1990. 1990 was an interesting year for inserts because it was the transition from the 1980s, which had kind of they were still trying to figure out how to make inserts, what they were going to be, into the 90s, where inserts were one of the foundational definitions of the decade and one of the driving points of the decade as well. So in 1990, this was the year when a couple of companies were starting to really kind of surge forward and develop inserts as we would know them. They were not refined to the point of being recognizable with, say, a 1992 or 1993 insert, but they were getting to that point. You were starting to see the care put into it, and the idea that we're going to focus on this as a mini set that really is its own mini set and is truly appreciated in that regard. In the 80s, you had some sets like Topps All-Stars or the 1,000-Yard Club cards and the Fleer stickers for Basketball All-Stars. All of these were good sets that were created every single year with a lot of care, and the designs were pretty good. But most inserts in the 1980s were really gum. They were puzzle pieces, they were holograms, they were little trivia cards, and that stuff was kind of nice, but that was just something that came in every single pack. That was kind of the way it was thought, that was kind of the way that it was experienced. And it was a bit of a hindrance in terms of where you could go with card collecting. So in 1990, this was the year where basically those elements were shown to be truly passé. They'd had their time and we were moving on. And I'm not even going to be talking about those. I just want to look at the inserts that were really true insert sets. And I like to start off with an honorable mention. And for this case, I'm going to go with 1990 Topps Football 1,000-Yard Club. And the reason I'm going with this is I actually like the card. I really do like the card. I realize that I'm supposed to hate it because it is the exact same card design as the cards in the main set. The only difference is, one, it's glossy, but two, it has a very strong yellow border around the outside. And a little note about designing cards: don't use a yellow border. A bold yellow border, just no, walk away. It's okay. It's just leave it there. I know it's kind of flashy, but you don't want to use it. Interestingly enough, in this card, it actually makes the card work. Now, the glossy treatment is another really good component, but the white on the original cards was not good. Here, the yellow, it perfectly balances everything out to the point where the card design feels good, the way that all the details come in, they feel good. Even the card back looks good. It has its own green color. This card, it's not a phenomenal card, but it's a good card. Why do I have it on here? Because it's 1990 Topps Football, and that set is terrible. And I look at this, and my brain keeps telling me, you're supposed to hate it. My heart doesn't. My heart actually loves it. It's this weird situation where I don't feel like I can leave it off of this list because of its association with the main cards in the set. And I know there's something that I'm missing. Maybe there's not. And so I hope it's not. I hope that this is one of the better insert sets from the year. But I'm going to throw it on here to say what it bothers me because I like it, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't. And so I'm putting it on there for the people who don't. And I'm saying I don't think it belongs on this list. And I almost didn't have this on the list because I also wanted to put the Don Russ MVP cards on here. This is another card that looks really good. It really does. The problem is Don Russ at this time was doing inserts that were basically cards from the set. They just had different numbers. When you first see these, it's kind of fun, and then after a while it just gets old. I don't like that they were doing this for all these years. This particular card looks really good. I really do like it. If it wasn't the exact same design as the rest of the set, I'd say this is one of the better cards. But even though the card looks good, the idea is terrible. And so both of these, I'm kind of torn with both of these. And so my honorable mention, I guess it's two at this point, but these two, I can't quite fully let off the hook. As far as the actual cards that aren't very good, I'm going to start off with 1990 Topps Hockey Team Season Leaders. And this card is, it's actually not terrible. The glossy finish is pretty good. The room for the image is good. I wish that they were making good images at this point. They didn't have the technology set up to really be able to create a good image on the card. And so this really does beg it really wants a good image to go into it. It doesn't have one, but that's not it's not the end of the world. The problem is that the card design is all down at the bottom, and it looks like kind of a weird one-off kind of card set that they would do every once in a while. It doesn't have any real strength to it. And so every time I look at this, I always go, oh. Then I take some time and look at it, and I realize, actually, I kind of like it. I mean, I don't really like it, but I really do kind of like it. Down at the bottom, well, first off, they have a couple of really good colors. And the strength of the colors carries well. And then the design work down at the bottom, they have a couple of dashed lines on either side of the name. And the dashed lines have these angles on either side, and then you have the color fade that goes between them, and it makes a really rich, interesting element to the card. And then the big flame over in the corner, actually, I like it. It's not kitsch. The way that all that works, when I take the time to really pay attention to it, I realize this is pretty cool. It's a boring card, but it has some cool elements. So I don't think it was a success, but I don't think it was completely a failure. This was one of those moments where they're starting to put the pieces together, and if they just take the time to really pay attention to them, they're going to get somewhere. And I look forward to them getting wherever they're going to get. So for number 5, it's not a terrible card. I think it's a huge work in progress. For number 4, this is a near miss. Well, I guess I should say it's a near hit, really. This is a card that really is well designed. The colors, I think the colors work. The design pattern, I like the top-heavy quality of it. There is definitely a strong shade of 1987 Fleer basketball in this, although this is a chromatic version of it. But overall, I like the card design. The problem is that the player has that big echo. The repetition of his shot through that, the whole inside of the card is really frustrating to me. Every time I look at the card, I initially go, oh, that's a nice card. And then that one design element, which is really kind of the key design element, jumps out and ruins the rest of it. I just want to see the player in his environment. And if you do like a ripple of a couple of reflections of him where they're kind of fading away, almost like he's in motion, okay, I could live with that. But it's this whole array that just disappears into the edge of the card. I think that they took something that worked and then just totally destroyed it, which, I mean, Fleer really did have a good tendency to do that. So I want to like the card. I don't. For number 3, I'm going with a card that has always been kind of mysterious to me. I started off in basketball in 1990, and the 1990 Fleer set was one that I was just kind of churning through, but they did have what I thought was a pretty cool insert, which was their All-Star stickers. Now, I'm giving it a lot of leeway. At the end of the day, the All-Star stickers, they're not great cards. I happen to like them, so I'm not putting them on the list, but I'm only not putting them on the list because I'm giving them a pass. I can't do that for the Rookie Sensations. I have heard that there are people who like it. I will never be able to see whatever it is that they like about it. I mean, by all means, I'm glad that they do like it, but I sure don't. It's a blocky card. It has this border around the outside that's very strong, and it creates a very cubistic approach to the whole card where you're really feeling the strength of all the corners. It has a big element down at the bottom, a big basketball. It is a bold card. It doesn't do anything bold. The only thing that's good about this card is the fact that the shot of the player actually stands out and seems really big. And I think the reason is because of the basketball. Now, when you look at the card, you really do your eye is drawn to the player. I do give it credit for that. It's not the first thing that you see, but you hit the border and then you go in and see the player. So that's good. And I think what happens is when you're looking at the player, there's that basketball down there that you see in your peripheral. And the big basketball, I think, kind of enhances the feeling of the size of the player. So I will give it credit for the fact that I think that they inadvertently pulled off a fun little trick in an otherwise terrible card. The reason that I'm kind of torn with this is I don't remember this from when I was a kid. I had a few cards of these. I know about that. I remember the set, I remember the hoops and skybox, and I remember the all-star cards. I remember all that stuff. I don't remember these rookie sensation cards at all. I really don't. And I remember it was years and years later when I put the set together and I had a few of these cards. And I basically had to pull them out and then try to figure out how to put together the set, because it was something that never lodged into my mind. It just totally disappeared. So I don't hate the card outright, but I'm really, really, really not a fan of this card. And for number 2, we're going back to baseball, Fleer again. And here we're going with Soaring Stars. And this card is the exact opposite of what I just talked about. I talked about a card that really didn't do anything. Well, here's a card that does nothing but something. And that's really the problem that it has. You can't win really with Fleer. They rarely did. We will see in the best of that they could actually put together good insert sets. They just really didn't for the most part. And what you got here is a big label down at the bottom that turns into this array, a rainbow array that comes up to this Soaring Stars text, and it screams 1970, not 1990. It screams 1970. This is really the kind of stuff they were doing in the 1970s. Unfortunately, they also used color tones that actually would kind of fit. Now, if you're going to do something as outrageous as this, own it, sell it, be all in. But they didn't. All of the colors are kind of muted. So that green, it's kind of it almost has a gray-like quality to it. The whole rainbow is not bold and standing out. The design is bold and standing out, but the colors are not. And so it goes out to do something, and then it just kind of peters out. And then while it's doing that, it completely blocks out the player. So you don't even see the player. And so this card, I do look at this and I wonder, what would this have been like if I was a kid and looked at this? Because I didn't collect baseball at the time, so I never saw this card really until I was making this video and I had to go out and get this card. That's the first time I saw it. And okay, I do wonder what it would have been like as a kid, how much the dynamism would have really grabbed me, or if this would have been like Rookie Sensations and just kind of disappeared and I forgot about it. I don't know. What I can tell you is I don't like it now. I absolutely don't like it. So this is probably good for kids. I don't currently see it. Someday I may. We'll see. But it's certainly not the worst card to me, because the worst card for me is going back to bland. This is a card that is super bland in terms of it has a bunch of things and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. Now this card does look to me like a Kmart set or a Toys R Us set or a Woolworths set. And to be perfectly fair, it kind of is a Kmart set. This was sold in blister packs that were sold specifically at Kmart. Now, these were not branded as Kmart. These cards don't even say Kmart. It's just that Kmart happened to be the only store selling the blister packs that had these cards in them. But the cards are designed just like these other cards, all the way to the back. The back very much looks that way. Here on the front, you've got the bat on one side, and it doesn't really do anything except kind of detract from from the balance of the card, from the player, etc. You've got the little gold trophy down at the corner that's just kind of floating, and it's this totally disjointed element that kind of commands its own presence. I do like the big section up at the top where the name is. That's the only part of the card that I like. But you got all this stuff going on, and what you don't really get the chance to see is the player in the middle. It's weird because it's a bunch of stuff thrown together and none of it does anything. And I do wish that they'd put Kmart on here somewhere, because if they'd done that, then I would have put this in a whole nother category, wouldn't have bothered to talk about it here. And I mean, let's be honest, then the Fleer Basketball All-Star cards would have ended up on this list as well. But this is on the list because it's not branded as Kmart, so it is just another insert. And it is so boring. That's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. This is a super, super boring card. That's kind of where we were at with these inserts. And we would see some of that again in 1991. But for 1990, this, I think, was the last year that we had totally unimaginative or totally uninspired card designs in inserts in a very large quantity. So this is obviously not an emotional high going through these, but it's interesting to see how low these are, because the best of that is a very, very big high. So it's going to be fun to explore that, and I may, in that video, I may actually show a contrast between the top 5 and the bottom 5, just to see how different they were. But this was basically where it was, and thankfully this was just about the end of the road for these unimaginative inserts, and we would start to see some good effort put into them moving forward. So definitely let me know in the comments below what you think, where you think that I'm off on all this. What do you think should have made the list? And check out my other videos if you haven't had a chance. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much for watching.